On the lush, green planet of Zoreth, Lieutenant Jake Carter stood out like a sore thumb. A human among a crowd of aliens, his presence wasn't unusual, but to the local Schiller species, he was something of an oddity. They had encountered humans before, but they were still trying to figure them out. Jake, however, was part of a special mission: to negotiate a peaceful alliance between Earth and the Schiller, a race known for their advanced technology, wisdom, and remarkable ability to communicate through subtle body language. Jake had been briefed on their customs, their way of speaking, and even their cultural quirks, but nothing could prepare him for his first real encounter with the Schiller's young ambassador, Naira. Naira wasn't like the others. She was sharp, quick-witted, and curious about everything. From the moment she laid eyes on Jake, she couldn't resist the urge to poke fun at him. As she walked toward him with a teasing grin on her face, Jake straightened up, trying to appear calm. The Schiller's eyes were large and luminous, their skin a mix of deep violet and pale silver. Despite their elegant appearance, their humor was sometimes sharp and pointed, especially when it came to the human species. Well, Naira said, crossing her arms as she looked Jake up and down. I see you're trying to blend in. But tell me, how does it feel to be so primitive? Jake blinked in surprise. He had expected some teasing, but not so directly. What do you mean? He asked, trying to hide his discomfort. He had prepared himself to be patient with the Schiller, but this was something different. Your clothes, for example. A strange mix of technology and fabric. Naira's voice was light, but there was a playful edge to it. I would think humans would have more elegant ways of dressing, given your intelligence. Jake glanced down at his uniform. It was standard issue. A dark green jacket, with the Earth Federation's insignia on it. Nothing special. We find it practical, he said with a shrug, his voice steady. It's not about looks, it's about comfort and function. Naira raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Comfort? Function? She chuckled, her violet eyes gleaming with amusement. How quaint. I suppose you still use manual tools too? Jake could feel the heat of her gaze as she circled him like a curious animal. His calm exterior was beginning to crack. We do use technology. Advanced technology. In fact, he said, his voice firming up. But just because we don't rely on the same things as you, doesn't make us any less capable. Naira stopped in her tracks, tilting her head as she studied him. You humans. You always seem so confident. But beneath all that confidence, I can see the truth. You're a species that relies on things that are barely a step above stone tools. How cute. Jake clenched his fists, but he knew better than to show anger. The success of the mission depended on him staying professional, no matter how much Naira's words stung. And your speech, she continued, walking back toward him with a slow, deliberate pace. So direct. So simple. It's almost like listening to a child. Don't you have a more refined way of communicating? Jake took a deep breath, forcing a smile. Our language works just fine, thank you. Naira wasn't finished. She paused in front of him, placing a hand on her chin as if she were studying a specimen. Tell me, Lieutenant Carter, do you ever wonder if your species will ever rise to the level of the advanced races in the galaxy? Or are you content staying on your little blue planet, thinking you're special? Jake felt a pang of frustration, but he remained calm. We're not trying to impress anyone. We just want to make allies. Peaceful allies. Peaceful? Naira scoffed. A species like yours, so prone to conflict, thinks it can achieve peace? How naive. I were. My clean to. Naira. Her words stung, but Jake knew better than to rise to the bait. Instead, he smiled politely and took a step back. It seems we have different perspectives on peace. But that's why I'm here, to show you that we are capable of it. If you'll give us the chance. Naira stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a small smirk, she shrugged. Maybe you'll surprise me, Lieutenant, but I'm not holding my breath. As Jake walked away, he couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and determination. Naira had teased him relentlessly, but he wasn't here to argue. He was here for a much bigger purpose, securing a peace treaty with the Schiller. And for that, he needed to stay focused. But what Naira didn't know was that beneath Jake's calm exterior, there was more to humanity than just their technology, their quirks, and their simple speech. Humans, as Jake would soon show her, were not as primitive as she thought. In fact, their true history was far more complex and extraordinary than any alien species could imagine. The next day, Jake found himself once again in the company of Naira. This time, their meeting wasn't a casual exchange. They were brought together for a special mission, to study a strange artifact discovered deep in the Zorathian jungle. A team of Schiller scientists had been working on it for weeks, but they had run into a problem they couldn't solve. As a human, Jake's knowledge of ancient Earth cultures might give him the insight they needed. At first, Jake wasn't sure why he was called in. He was still trying to get used to being around the Schiller, who seemed to have a way of making everything feel like a test. But he was determined to make his mark. His mission, after all, was about building trust and proving that humanity wasn't as primitive as it seemed. When they arrived at the dig site, the scene was breathtaking. The jungle was thick and lush, with towering trees and vibrant flowers unlike anything Jake had ever seen before. The Schiller scientists were gathered around a large stone table, examining what looked like an old, weathered box. The artifact was covered in symbols, intricate patterns that Jake immediately recognized. They weren't alien, they were human. "Lieutenant Carter, I trust you've studied our findings?" The lead Schiller scientist, named Varric, greeted him. His voice was smooth, but there was an undercurrent of expectation in his tone. Jake nodded, stepping closer to the artifact. "I've seen symbols like these before, back on Earth. This might be an ancient relic, possibly from a time before humanity left our homeworld." Naira stood nearby, arms crossed, watching him with a critical eye. The teasing grin from yesterday was gone. Today, she seemed more serious, perhaps even a little curious. She observed Jake carefully as he approached the box, feeling the weight of the moment. "Can you open it?" Naira asked, her voice surprisingly neutral. Jake crouched down, running his fingers gently over the symbols. "I can try, but I need to figure out the mechanism first. These symbols are part of an ancient Earth language, a script we used centuries ago. Not many people know how to read it now." "You've seen this before?" Naira asked, her voice skeptical. Jake paused, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. "It's not widely known, but I've spent years studying ancient Earth history. The artifacts we left behind after we spread across the galaxy. They tell a story. A story no one has pieced together yet." Naira's eyes narrowed. "You mean humans weren't always confined to Earth?" Jake smiled, sensing her growing interest. "No. The truth is, we were once a part of something much larger, a civilization that stretched across the stars. But over time, we lost contact with our origins. We settled on Earth, and the rest of our history faded into myth." Varric watched them closely. "This is unexpected. If what you say is true, then you are not merely a species from Earth. You are part of something far grander." Jake nodded, but his attention was fixed on the box. The symbols seemed to form a pattern now, something that he could almost understand. He reached down to the side of the artifact and pressed a series of symbols in sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the box began to open. Inside was a small, glowing orb. It pulsed with energy, casting an eerie light across their faces. Naira's eyes widened as she leaned in closer, intrigued by the object. "What is it?" she asked, her earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. Jake reached out and gently lifted the orb from the box. It was warm to the touch, humming with power. "This is a key," he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "A key to something that's been hidden for centuries." The moment he touched the orb, a series of images flashed in his mind, visions of an ancient human empire, its ships gliding through space, its cities spread across distant worlds. He saw Earth, but not as it was now, but as it once had been. A thriving hub of knowledge, power, and exploration. "That's impossible," Naira whispered, as if reading his thoughts. "Humans once controlled the stars?" Jake's heart raced. He had heard rumors of such things, but never in his wildest dreams did he think he would uncover something so monumental. He set the orb back down in its box, and the vision faded, leaving him with a sense of awe and wonder. "Yes," he said, his voice steady but full of conviction. "We were more than just a species on a small planet. We were the architects of an empire that spanned galaxies." Naira was silent for a long moment. She looked at Jake, then back at the glowing orb, still trying to process the enormity of what he had just revealed. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why? Why did we never hear about this? The Schiller have been exploring for centuries, but we've never come across any evidence of a human empire. Why keep it hidden?" Jake looked at her, his expression somber. "Because we lost everything. The empire fell, and the few who survived scattered. The knowledge was hidden, not just to protect it, but because we didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past." "Then why bring it to light now?" Naira asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Jake's eyes darkened. "Because the galaxy is changing. There are new threats out there, and humanity needs to be ready. This artifact, this orb, is just one part of what we left behind. There are others, and they'll help us rise again." Naira stared at him for a long time, her thoughts racing. She had always viewed humans as a species struggling to find their place among the stars. They had no advanced technology, no great history. They were nothing compared to the Schiller, the galaxy's most enlightened race. But now, with the discovery of this artifact, everything had changed. "You're telling me that humanity is not what I thought it was," Naira said slowly, still processing the enormity of what she had just learned. Jake smiled, but it was a quiet, knowing smile. "That's right. We're not just a small, insignificant species. We are the heirs of something much greater, and it's time for us to step back into the light." Varek stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "If humanity truly possesses such knowledge, such power, it will shift the balance of the entire galaxy." Jake looked at him, his gaze steady. "That's why I'm here, Varek. I didn't come to beg for a place in the galaxy. I came to remind everyone that humanity isn't just a footnote in history. We are the next chapter." As they stood there, looking down at the glowing orb, it felt as if the weight of the past had shifted, and the future was now within reach. The universe, vast and full of mystery, was about to see humanity in a new light. And Naira? She was no longer just an arrogant, teasing young Schiller. She had become someone who now saw the truth about humanity. They were far more than anyone had given them credit for. The galaxy was about to change, and Jake Carter was ready to lead the charge. The days after the discovery of the orb were filled with urgency. Jake, Naira, and the team of Schiller scientists worked tirelessly to uncover more secrets hidden in the depths of the ancient artifacts they had found. But with every new revelation, the stakes grew higher. Jake knew the galaxy was on the edge of something monumental, and Earth's true history was about to be thrust into the spotlight. The Schiller, once skeptical and mocking of humanity, were now fully invested in the mystery of Earth's lost empire. Naira, who had once ridiculed Jake and his species, found herself increasingly captivated by the depths of human history. She had seen how humans had survived countless struggles, and how they had once been the architects of an interstellar empire. But the real question was, why had humanity abandoned all of that? Jake didn't have the answers yet, but he knew he was on the brink of something bigger than anyone could have imagined. The artifact he had discovered wasn't the only one. There were more, scattered across distant planets. The knowledge contained in these artifacts had the potential to change the balance of power in the galaxy. It was early one morning when Jake received the message that would change everything. The Schiller had found another artifact, an ancient data crystal embedded deep beneath the surface of Zorath. Jake immediately knew that this discovery was different. The crystal, unlike the orb, wasn't just a relic. It was a map to the hidden worlds of humanity's forgotten empire. Lieutenant Carter, Varek, the lead Schiller scientist, said when Jake arrived at the dig site, "We've analyzed the data from the crystal. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's as if it's been waiting for someone to unlock it." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Schiller had known about ancient technologies, but this was something entirely new. He turned to Naira, who had been following him in silence, her gaze intense. "This is it, Naira," Jake said quietly. "This map could lead us to the heart of humanity's lost empire." Naira nodded, her usual playful demeanor replaced by a more serious expression. "What will you do with it?" she asked, her voice surprisingly soft. Jake looked at her. For the first time, he saw genuine concern in her eyes. It was a far cry from the teasing young Schiller he had met only days ago. "I don't know yet, but if this map leads to what I think it does, humanity's future could change forever." The map led them to a remote planet, far from the familiar reaches of the known galaxy. As they entered the atmosphere, Jake felt a strange pull in his chest, as if something deep inside him was awakening. The planet, covered in dense forests and vast oceans, seemed untouched by time. It was a place that hadn't seen visitors in millennia. The landing was smooth, and as they disembarked, Jake couldn't help but feel that they were standing on the edge of history. The landscape before them was beautiful, but there was an eerie stillness in the air. It felt as though the planet itself was waiting for them. "This is where it all began," Jake whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He had no proof, no solid evidence, but something deep within him told him that this was the cradle of humanity's lost empire. This was Earth's true birthplace. Varek, Naira, and the rest of the team followed him as he ventured further into the dense jungle. The map had led them to an ancient structure buried beneath the overgrowth. The walls of the building were covered in the same symbols Jake had seen on the first artifact. This was no ordinary building. It was a monument to the once great human civilization that had built the empire. The doors of the structure were massive, adorned with intricate carvings that told stories of exploration, of ships traveling between the stars, of human ingenuity and courage. Jake felt a lump form in his throat as he gazed at the images. This was his heritage. This was what had been lost to time. "We need to get inside," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. The doors creaked open as Varek used an ancient device to unlock them. As they stepped inside, a wave of cold air hit them. The interior was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the symbols etched into the walls. But as Jake's eyes adjusted, he saw what lay before him. A massive chamber, filled with technology unlike anything he had ever seen. At the center of the room stood a large console, its surface covered in dust. It looked like it hadn't been touched in centuries, yet the technology was still functional. Without hesitation, Jake moved toward it. His fingers hovered over the controls, unsure of what would happen when he activated it. But he knew one thing. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Be careful, Naira warned, her voice tinged with concern. We don't know what this technology could do. Jake nodded, but his resolve was unwavering. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. He placed his hand on the console, and immediately, a holographic image flickered to life. The room seemed to hum with energy as the hologram expanded, revealing an ancient star map, showing not just the location of Earth, but the locations of dozens of human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Look at this, Jake said, awe in his voice. This is our empire. This is what we left behind. Naira stepped closer, her eyes wide with disbelief. But this is more than just a colony. It's a network, a web of planets that were once connected, unified under one banner. And now, they're all lost. Jake's heart sank. The reality of what he had discovered hit him like a wave. Humanity had built a vast empire, stretching across the stars, and then through some disaster, some great tragedy, it had all fallen apart. The people who had once ruled the galaxy had disappeared, leaving behind nothing but whispers in the dark. Where are they? Naira asked, her voice filled with wonder and sadness. What happened to all of them? Jake didn't have an answer. He had no idea what had caused the fall of humanity's empire. But one thing was clear. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. The technology they had uncovered could change everything. This is only the beginning, Jake said, a fire burning in his eyes. We have to find out what happened. And when we do, we're going to take our place in the galaxy once again. We're not going to let humanity be forgotten. Naira looked at him, her expression unreadable. But then, for the first time since they had met, she smiled a smile of respect, not mockery. I think you just might be right. Varek, who had been studying the holographic map, turned to them. If the rest of the galaxy learns what humanity has hidden, there will be those who seek to control it. We must move carefully. Jake nodded. We will. But we have to start somewhere, and I think we've just found the first piece of the puzzle. As they left the ancient building and looked up at the stars, Jake knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity's true legacy was about to be rediscovered, and it would rise again. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. The age of humanity was far from over. It was just beginning.